Ethan Graves had always been drawn to the sounds between sounds. By day, he was just another voice lost in the sea of independent broadcasters. But by night, he was the host of Midnight Echo, an underground online station where the static hummed with whispers of the unknown. Conspiracies, strange broadcasts, eerie music. His show wasn't just entertainment. It was a refuge for the sleepless and the paranoid. The Midnight Echo community was tight-knit. Listeners from all over the world tuned in to share their thoughts, theories, and sometimes their fears.
Ethan, man, I swear they took me again last night.
That was Ben from Michigan, a regular. He claimed to have been abducted by aliens at least 6 times.
I woke up outside my house, no memory of how I got there, and my phone, battery drained. Every time it happens, I hear this low hum before I black out. You ever heard of something like that?
Then there was Travis, a self-proclaimed flat Earth investigator.
I went out to one of those restricted areas near Antarctica. I swear, Ethan, there's a military operation guarding the edge. They're hiding something.
Most of their stories were insane, but Ethan never laughed at them. Because every so often something came along that even he couldn't explain. That night was one of those nights. Ethan had spent years scanning shortwave frequencies, hunting for number stations, abandoned military signals, and rogue pirate broadcasts. Most nights he found nothing but static. But that night, something found him. While manually tuning through dead frequencies, he noticed an anomaly. A small, fluctuating signal spike at a frequency that should have been empty. At first, it was barely there, a faint trace buried under layers of noise. But the more he focused, the clearer it became, almost as if it was responding. Curious, he isolated the frequency, filtering out the static with his audio software. That's when he heard it. Then the numbers began. 0, 3, 5, 8. It didn't follow the patterns of traditional number stations. The pauses between digits weren't consistent. The voice sounded unnatural, distorted, as if it wasn't meant to be heard. Ethan hit record. This was something new, something wrong. And that's when his problems started. Ethan played it for his audience. Have you guys ever heard something like this? Because I swear it doesn't sound right. His chat exploded. Turn it off. I hear voices in my house. My radio just switched on by itself. It's not a number station. It's something else. Then a private message appeared on his screen. No username, no timestamp. Just one sentence. Do not broadcast this again. They are listening. Ethan couldn't let it go. He started digging, tracing the signal's origin to a decommissioned military facility in Poland, known as Project Echo. Project Echo was a Cold War experiment in acoustic weaponry, but Ethan uncovered something even more disturbing. The project wasn't just about psychological warfare. It was about communication, but not with people. Soldiers stationed at the site reported hearing voices from the static, whispers that knew their names. Several of them disappeared, leaving behind radios still playing their own distorted voices. Then he found the worst part. The transmissions never stopped. The facility was shut down, but the signal, it was still broadcasting. That night, something happened that made him regret everything. The same signal was playing, but this time the voice was saying his name. Ethan Graves. Panic set in. Ethan rushed to shut off the radio, but the signal kept playing, even with the power disconnected. Then his phone buzzed. A new message, no number, no sender. Do not listen. Do not speak of it. It is awake. Determined to uncover the truth, Ethan traveled to the location, finding the abandoned Project Echo bunker in a remote forest. The bunker was hidden, long forgotten, but as he approached, his radio, turned off, battery removed, suddenly crackled to life. And then just before he stepped inside, the transmission changed. The numbers reversed. Instead of counting up, they were now counting down. 9, 6, 3. Ethan realized too late. This wasn't a transmission, it was a summoning. Ethan Graves had never been one to shy away from the unknown. It was what fueled his show, his obsession, and the audience that had formed around Midnight Echo. But tonight, everything was different. He sat in front of his microphone, visibly shaken but determined to push forward. His voice was quivering as he spoke. "I don't know if I should be broadcasting this, but something is following me. I think it's time I tell you the truth." His words were suddenly interrupted by an overwhelming static, a deep, low hum that distorted his voice. His face twisted in confusion. He adjusted the dials, but nothing worked. The hum grew louder, more insistent, like something was breathing through the speakers. The lights above him flickered. "Ethan." The voice wasn't his. It wasn't even human. It was a warped version of something familiar, deep and layered with distortion. Ethan's eyes darted around the room. He stood up, his chair scraping against the floor as he rushed to shut off his equipment, but the noise refused to stop. It echoed in the room like it was alive. Then came the message, a chilling, clear whisper coming through the static. "You can't hide, Ethan." His pulse raced. For the first time, he was scared. He ran a hand over his face and tried to regain control, but the camera feed glitched. The screen flickered, showing distorted, static-laden visuals of Ethan's face before switching to a black screen. A shadow passed behind him. The viewers watching the live feed could see the moment it happened, just for a split second, but enough to make them freeze in terror. As the camera faltered, the glitching increased. His voice warped, each word losing its clarity. "Oh my God, it's inside." He dropped the microphone, his hands shaking uncontrollably as he stared at the computer. His chat exploded in panic. "Ethan, where are you? What's happening? This isn't normal. You need to stop." The feed cut to black and everything went silent. For a few moments, the world outside Ethan's stream was still. But inside the chat, the storm had already begun. The chat room was in chaos. Hundreds of messages poured in, all frantic, all desperate for some sign that Ethan was still alive. Some of his regular listeners tried to call in, but no one answered. Others, who had never interacted before, started flooding the chat with their own strange experiences. I heard a hum coming from my radio. My lights just flickered, and I swear I heard him say my name. "Ethan, please answer me. I know you're there." Then the messages started to get darker. Some people began speculating that Ethan had been taken, just like the voices he had talked about on the show. They got him, the government. They're hiding the truth. They've been watching him. He was too close to uncovering something. He wasn't just a broadcaster, he was digging into things he shouldn't have. It didn't take long before conspiracy theories started to flood the forums, the place where Midnight Echo's fans gathered to discuss every bizarre broadcast. Threads were created with titles like "Ethan Graves, the truth behind his disappearance," and "What did he find?" Some users began claiming that Project Echo, the old Cold War facility Ethan had been investigating, was still operational and that it was responsible for his vanishing. Others went further, saying that Ethan's disappearance was part of a larger government cover-up, that he had gotten too close to uncovering a secret alien signal or a hidden project that could change the world. They posted links to government websites and old files that seemed to back up their claims. But in the midst of the growing hysteria, there were still some voices of reason. A few users posted messages that tried to ground the situation, suggesting that Ethan had faked his disappearance for some kind of publicity stunt. But the vast majority dismissed this as ignorance. Ethan would never stage something like this, not after everything he had uncovered. As the hours passed, police were called to Ethan's apartment. By the time they arrived, the place was locked from the inside, and no one answered the door. The officers broke in, expecting to find an empty apartment, maybe some foul play. But what they found was far worse. The radio was still playing, the very same signal. Distorted and hollow, it seemed to pulse through the apartment like it had a life of its own. Ethan's computer was on, the last known broadcast frozen on the screen, but there was nothing else, no trace of him. The room was silent except for the faint hum of the radio. The police found no signs of a struggle, no clues as to where he had gone. His belongings were untouched, his door locked, and the only thing out of place was the eerie signal playing through his speakers. Then they found something worse. On the desk, beside his radio, was a notebook. The last page read, "They're listening. I can hear them now. They're here. God help me." In the wake of his disappearance, the community shattered. The forums erupted in heated arguments. Some members insisted that Ethan had been taken by the government to silence him. Others believed the signal itself had reached out to him, pulling him into some kind of otherworldly dimension. Some even posted on Reddit claiming that they had heard the signal themselves, coming from their own radios. On one of the more popular conspiracy forums, the message read, "We told you they were controlling him. He was too close to the truth. The government will never admit it." A few members took it upon themselves to dig deeper into Ethan's last moments, combing through every detail they could find, trying to piece together clues. But the truth, if there was one, remained elusive. Days turned into weeks, and Midnight Echo went silent. And then, one night, the signal returned, this time not through Ethan's radio, but through the same frequency he had once uncovered. It was weaker than before, more distorted, but still there. It spoke only one word: "You are next." It was him. It was his voice. It was voice of Ethan. And that's the story of Ethan Graves and the lost frequency. But the question remains, what really happened to him? Was it the government? Something from beyond our world? Or did he hear something he was never supposed to? Let us know what you think in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like and subscribe for more dark mysteries and unexplained horror. And if you dare, keep listening. But be careful, because sometimes when you listen too closely, they listen back. See you in the next one, if you're still here.